Hi, and welcome to the Disability Vote Coalition What's on the Ballot March Lunch and Learn. I'm Wendy Hine. I work with Disability Rights Wisconsin and the Disability Vote Coalition, and I'm here with Jenny Newgart from the Board for People with Developmental Disabilities. And our two agencies, Disability Rights Wisconsin and the Wisconsin Board for People with Developmental Disabilities, coordinate the Wisconsin Disability Vote Coalition. So next slide, I'll tell you a little bit about the Wisconsin Disability Vote Coalition. We're a nonpartisan effort, and our goal is that people with disabilities would have full participation in the entire electoral process. So we talk to folks about registering to vote, casting a vote, accessing polling places. We work with the Wisconsin Election Commission on helping them think about accessibility. We are, as I said, we're coordinated by Disability Rights Wisconsin and the Board for People with Developmental Disabilities, but we have community agencies from around the state. And lots of different partners who are people with disabilities and varied parts of the state. So we're a big effort, and we're always looking for folks that are interested in working with us. You can learn a little bit more about us at our website, www.disabilityvote.org. Next slide. This statistic is a really powerful one. And it's that if people with disabilities voted at the same rate as people without disabilities, there would be 1.75 million more votes. I just read yesterday that a local election, I can't remember, I think it was maybe in Texas, was decided by 5 votes. So a vote is powerful. And if you think about 1.75 million votes, that's huge. I feel like I can't even really fathom a million. So 1.75 million more votes. Why are votes important? Elected officials are making decisions about things that are important to you and to me. When we show up to vote, it makes elected officials realize that people with disabilities care and we're paying attention to the decisions that they make. And that fact might change the way an elected official votes. So they don't have a job if we don't vote for them. And so they're gonna care about the engaged people who are engaged in voting about their opinions. And they might vote differently. One thing that I think sometimes people don't realize is that local elections are as important as national elections. When we're voting for a presidential office, I think there's almost nobody in the country who isn't aware that there's an election. But sometimes for local elections, like school board, we might not even know that there are seats open and that we're going to have a vote. But it's those elections are really, really important to our local communities, and they make a big difference in our everyday life. So those elections are just as important and sometimes even more important for certain things. Also, voting is your civic responsibility. As a citizen, your voice matters, and voting matters. So next slide, please. So in order to vote, a voter in Wisconsin has to be registered. And so we're going to talk about ways to register to vote. You can register to vote online at myvote.wi.gov. You go to that website, and it's a fairly easy process. And you can do that up to 20 days before the election. And I think today or it's that might be coming real soon. So if you're going to do that, do it really soon. By mail is the same. And you can register to vote in person at your municipal clerk's office through the Friday before the election. So you have to provide your proof of residence. And that we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but that's something you must do. A really cool thing in Wisconsin, and this is not the case in every state, is that you can register at your polling place on election day. So if you're not registered, don't let that stop you from voting. You can register on election day at your polling place. If you're a voter who lives in a care facility, or if you support voters in a care facility, sometimes care facilities are able to have special voting deputies, and those special voting deputies might be able to help voters register. So that's a specific way of doing things, is with a special voting deputy. And if you need more information about special voting deputies, we have that at our website, or you can call the hotline number that I'm going to give you later. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to share with you this nice slide about the registration deadlines. They are, oh, see, I was right. I thought today was the deadline for mail or online, but it's tomorrow. So you have until tomorrow to vote, to register online or by mail. So if you're going to do that, get your phone or your computer out and do that today or tomorrow. And in person, again, you can do it on election day at your polling place, or the week before election, until the week before, till the Friday before. You can do it in person at your municipal clerk's office. The deadlines for the August 11th election, the primary, and the November 3rd general election are there too. I won't read those to you, but this slide will be available to you afterwards, and they're nice to have. You can jot them in your computer so that you have those. Next slide. This is absentee voting information. So if you are requesting an absentee ballot, which means that you're going to vote not at the polling place, but you're going to vote at home, or not like outside of the polling place, you have to request that by April 2nd for the April election. I will say that with the way that postage works, this date kind of doesn't work out. So the election is April 7th. So if you request the ballot April 2nd, that doesn't give really enough time for it to get mailed. So we would suggest that you request that absentee ballot as soon as possible. And then if you're going to mail it back, allow 2 weeks to return it by mail. You can also drop it off at your municipal clerk's office, or if you have a drop box in your area, you can do that as well. Your absentee ballot has to be returned by 8 p.m. on election day when the polls close. Another option for voting is early voting. And that's where you go to an early voting location and you can vote. It can start up to 2 weeks before the election, and it ends the Sunday before. But every municipality does this a little bit differently. They're going to have different schedules. They're going to locate their early voting centers at different places, perhaps. Some places it's at the municipal clerk's office. Some of the bigger cities might have early voting sites. And how do you find that out? You can go to the My Vote website and you can look up where your local absentee options are. I think the next slide actually shows me what that screen might look like. So if I were in the city of Fort Atkinson, I can look up where my early voting options are. When I look up, see in the very corner there's a dark box and it says vote absentee in person. And so then when you can go to that spot and then you can look those things up. And then it'll list for you where the address where you can go to vote absentee in person. And it also lists the schedule. If you're not a person who's using the internet, you can call your municipal clerk and they can tell you.
And
Next.
Wendy, I just
Yep.
want to point out, It's the clerks who populate this. So if the clerks didn't provide the hours and location and things like that, you won't see it here, but you will get the number to call. If they provided it, you'll see all the information you need of where to go and when.
Thank you. I I forgot to mention that. So I appreciate that because that can be confusing for people if they go there and don't see anything but their clerk's information. So um, thank you. Next slide, please. Um, so what's going to be on the ballot for these upcoming elections? Again, sometimes it's confusing because we just don't know what's coming up. So in fact, I work in the voting sector and I always have to look up ahead of time which things are going to be on my ballot. So this April 7th spring election is going to be Wisconsin Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals and the circuit courts. And then depending on where you live, there will be local elections. But that will vary depending on where you live. So some have school board elections, some have county positions. Some might have like town seats, things like that. And so you're gonna have different things depending on where you live. August 11th is a partisan primary, so that means that we're trying to narrow the offices that will be voted on in November. If there are more than two candidates, then it's trying to narrow those down. So that will be a partisan primary. And we'll have a webinar closer to that to explain to you. Sometimes the partisan primary can be confusing for folks, and so we'll explain that to thoroughly in a webinar closer to that time. November 3rd, it's great to have these things on your radar so you can start to think about them. We'll be getting a new governor in Wisconsin, a new lieutenant governor, a new attorney general, or that the same one again, although our governor isn't running again. But we'll be electing these offices to clarify. Attorney general, secretary of state, treasurer, all 8 congressional representatives, all 99 of our state representatives, and 17 state senators. I lost the slide here. Let's see. I just have to add it back up. Here we go.
Sorry, Wendy, people are
Sorry.
having trouble seeing the slide, so I was asked to stop share and reshare. I
Oh,
forgot
okay.
that cut you
Got
off.
it. Okay. Um, the your county sheriff will be reelected. That's an elected office in Wisconsin. Some people don't know that, but it is. And then your county clerk will be reelected, or a new that's an office that will be on the ballot. So that's what's for the all these elections in 2026 are called midterm elections, and that's what will be on the ballot. So we're going to kind of focus on this April 7th one. So let's take a look at the next slide, which is about the Wisconsin Supreme Court. So there's 2 candidates running. And they're currently their Court of Appeals judges, Maria Lazar and Chris Taylor. And these are, so Wisconsin Supreme Court is a really long seat. It's 10 years. So that's different than a lot of the positions, which are 4 years or 2 years. It's a 10-year term. And these courts, the Supreme Court, hears cases, hears around 60 cases per year. And so um, they make decisions that might affect our rights and liberties. So you might think like, well, I'm not going to court for anything in the Supreme Court, but the decisions that they make affect how law is carried out in Wisconsin. So it can have some pretty big ripple effects that affect us personally. Things about like how voting happens with legislative districts and maps. They can make decisions that affect access to health care. And I think we all access health care, so that affects us. Um, They can make decisions about the environment. Again, the environment is important to all of us. And then they can affect things that are specifically disability issues, and so that's really personal for us. We have a fact sheet that's the Wisconsin Supreme Court fact sheet that we would love for you to check out and share with people as you look forward to the Wisconsin Supreme Court election.
I would say the
Also,
most recent thing that the Supreme Court did that affects us is they reversed the decision to bring back to allow us to have drop boxes again, which was a very important issue for people with disabilities. Since many of them are non-drivers, it was very convenient to be able to use drop boxes. So that's a really good example of what the Supreme Court did.
yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That's something that really affects a lot of people with disabilities returning their ballots. So really big deal. Um, So something else that will be on the ballot is Court of Appeals judges. There are 4 Court of Appeals districts and 16 judges serving in those. So how the Court of Appeals works is that there are usually 3 judge panels that hear a case. And then those judges make a decision based on, or each of like the 3 judges decide. Sometimes there are small claims actions or like municipal ordinance violations, traffic violations. And those are exceptions that might be heard by a single judge unless the panel is requested. So that's a little bit different than I think what some of us envision for how court works. Decisions that are made by the Court of Appeals can be appealed to a higher court. So we have a fact sheet that kind of talks about this office, and you're welcome to take a look at that. The link is there. You're welcome to print it and share it. And we would encourage you to share that with people so that they understand the office that they're voting for. The next slide talks about circuit court judges. So Wisconsin has a lot of circuit court judges, 249, but if you think of how big the state is and how many people live here, and that they're spread out all over, that means that there's at least one in every county. And of course, more populated counties have more. These judges are for 6-year terms. And again, they're nonpartisan elections. So I feel like, to me, oftentimes voters have to think a little bit more and learn a little bit more about candidates when there's not a partisan, when it's not a partisan election, because sometimes voters, I think, with partisan races will think like, oh, I just vote this way or I just vote that way. And they'll just go with the party that they like. And in these cases, you really have to evaluate how a judge has performed in the past or what they say are their priorities, things like that. And we're going to share with you some information later about how to be an informed voter about those things. But this circuit court judges are nonpartisan, and they serve for 6-year terms. And these are like the main trial courts for both civil and criminal cases. So that this is kind of what I think, this is the court that most folks think about when they think about court. They do guardianships, civil mental health, termination of parental rights, or like if you're in like the working in foster care system or something, you usually call that TPR. CHIPS petitions, which is again child in need of protection services. So that's circuit courts. And we have a circuit court fact sheet that you are again encouraged to print out and share with others. Um, so those are the judge elections that we will be having. And I'm going to turn it over to Jenny now. And she's going to talk to you about local elections and then also some other parts of this.
All right. Thank you, Wendy. As Wendy said, I'm Jenny Newgart. I am co-chair of the Vote Coalition, and I work for the board for people with developmental disabilities. One thing that we like to stress at the DVC is local elections, and I know Wendy mentioned it in the beginning, but it bears repeating. Local elections are so important. And we stress this because historically people don't show up to vote in those more local elections. They'll show up for big ones like president, governor, but really, the smaller elections, if you will, that are about more local races like school board, the mayor, the city council, the judges, city clerks, those kinds of rules, those are people making decisions about your everyday life. So you may feel the impact of those more even than at a statewide level or federal level. Your school board is deciding things about curriculum and school quality and, thinking about is there anybody to represent students with disabilities on that school board? um, Things like when is your trash getting picked up and how often, public health, transportation, where they're going to put the next stoplight, what businesses come in to your city, housing. Those are all things that really impact our day to day. And these are the people making those decisions. So it's extremely important to take the time to learn about those candidates and show up to vote in those elections. Again, there's a link to this fact sheet. Um, So how do you find out about the candidates? That we get that question a lot. The first thing is to know what's on the ballot. Wendy had mentioned that earlier. If you go to My Vote Wisconsin, you put in your address and it will bring your ballot up and it'll show you exactly what your ballot's going to look like. I discovered this years ago, but I have never voted in an election without looking at my ballot first because I did get caught off guard one time, and didn't know who the candidates were. And that's not a comfortable place to be. So I always check this first, and then I have time to look up information about the candidates, and figure out how I want to vote. To learn more about the candidates, there's three really good websites that we recommend: Vote 411, Ballotpedia, and Wisconsin Vote. They all provide nonpartisan information about candidates. Oftentimes, it's like a questionnaire that they answer, and they lay it out sort of side by side. So if you went to look at the Supreme Court candidates, you would be able to get a really good idea of what their views are, how they've voted on or ruled on things in the past. Um, and they also, in some local elections, you can find information about candidates. Um, Other places to go would be like your local newspaper if you still have one. Our community has a community page where they post information about local candidates. Sometimes you can find like a debate or a forum in your own community. Sometimes the local candidates, you might have to work a little bit harder to find the information. Um, but there are options for figuring out who's on the ballot and what their views are. The other thing for just some general resources about the coalition is we do an e-newsletter, and we have so many resources on our website. It's worth taking a look. They're all specific to disability and voting. So if you have a question about disability and voting, that's the place to go. We also encourage you to follow us on our Facebook page. You're on a device right now, so before you end, we encourage you to go and like that page if you haven't already. And then at the end of the slides, we have that hotline, that 800 number that people can call. So if you have any question about voting at any time, just call that number. Most of the time, you'll probably talk to Wendy, but we'll help you work through whatever issue you may be having, and you can also email us. So we also like to take the time to talk about rights because what we've learned is people with disabilities don't always know their rights, and some people have not been able to vote because they didn't know their rights. So first and foremost is everybody has a right to vote privately and independently. Sometimes that can be a barrier for people with disabilities. They might need assistance with their ballot, marking their ballot. Um, and so it makes it harder to have that privacy. There are accommodations that can be made that we'll talk about in a minute to help with that. Um, Everybody should have right to access their polling place. They should be accessible inside and out. However, we know reality. Most of us living and working with people with disabilities know what's supposed to be and what it actually is. So sometimes people may run into barriers accessing the polling place, in which case you can do curbside voting. I'll explain that in a minute. You can ask for accommodations. If there's a long line, you can ask to sit in a chair rather than sitting in that line. Um, you have to sign the poll book, so a signature guide can be provided to help you if you have visual impairments or a hard time with a steady hand. That helps guide you. You can ask for magnifying glass. And there is a rule that you have to, your name has to be stated out loud, your name and address. It used to be you had to state that out loud, but many people with disabilities simply can't do that. So a law was put into place several years ago now where anybody can state your name and address. It could be somebody with you, it could be the poll worker. As long as it's said out loud, it does not have to be said by the person. There's still sometimes confusion about that. So if you were to get any pushback on that, you can advocate. And if you had problems, you can talk to the chief election inspector at that polling place to get that worked out. We just strongly encourage you not to leave without voting. You do have a right to have assistance marking your ballot. It can't be your employer or your union rep or obviously somebody who's on the ballot. Um, and if you don't have somebody to do that, you could ask the poll worker to do that. Some other rights is the curbside voting I mentioned. More and more people are learning about this as an option. It basically means you vote from your car. So if for some reason you can't get into the polling place, which could be physical access, but I mean, it also could be, elections in February and ice and snow that could be dangerous. You could vote curbside in that case. Curbside is for people with disabilities. And what happens is two poll workers come out to your car, they check your ID, and they bring you the ballot, and you vote the ballot from your car, and then they take it back in. They take care of signing the poll book for you, and submit your ballot. The trick of curbside voting is figuring out how your polling place sets that up. It's different everywhere. Um, I feel like best practice is a phone number posted clearly. Most of us have to have cell phones. I know we don't all do, but it's easiest if you can stay in your car, call the number, and get that help. I use a wheelchair. If I had to get out and ring a doorbell, which some people have, um, it kind of defeats the purpose. I'm still having to get out on snow and ice and deal with those kinds of situations, but sometimes you will see a doorbell. we've even had a small municipality tell us that, like, yeah, you just pull up to the window and wave and Bob comes out. So what we recommend is that you call your polling place if you think this might be an option you're going to use. Call your polling place, give them a few days ahead, the closer to the day, the busier they are, and ask them how that works. Sometimes they have parking spots designated just for curbside voting. Um, they are supposed to have signage. The DVC is working on improving that signage, making the rules around that a little more clear. We also encourage people to file a complaint if you feel that any of your rights were violated, because all the complaints get looked into, and then that, if that takes care of a problem for you, it takes care of a problem for everybody after you. And a lot of times, I've run into problems at my polling place, and I just talked to someone right then and there, and they fixed it right then and there. Sometimes it's just, oh geez, we didn't realize. But if your needs aren't met, we encourage you to file a written complaint. You can do that through WAC, or we can assist you in that process. A lot of people don't know if you make a mistake on your ballot, you can request another ballot from the election officials. They'll take the one you made a mistake on, and they'll call what they call spoil it, and they'll give you a new ballot. You may also bring a notes sheet to the polling place. So, like the November election, there's going to be a lot of offices on that ballot. Um, and sometimes that's hard to remember. So, you can write down the names of all the candidates you plan on voting for and bring that sheet with you, and it'll make the whole process a lot quicker. It's really important to realize that no one should tell you how to vote. I think we all pretty much talk to people that we trust and ask about candidates, especially if you're having a hard time finding information. That's natural. But at the end of the day, you have to make that decision for yourself. So, parents, caregivers, support staff, nobody should be telling you who to vote for. A little more on that accessible voting machine. This is a great way for people who might have difficulty otherwise voting privately and independently to do that. It does require you to go in person to vote, but each polling place is required to have at least one accessible voting machine. You can see one in that picture there. There's a couple different kinds. That's pretty seeing there. Um, it essentially it reads the ballot to you. You can see the headphones that she is wearing, and then you make your choice. The great thing about the accessible voting machine is you can't make a mistake. So, say you accidentally voted for two people and you're only supposed to vote for one, or you didn't vote in a race, it will alert you of that. Um, so if you voted on a regular ballot, you could potentially make a mistake on that and not realize it. You can't do that with this one. The machine should be set up in a way that people can't see who you're voting for. Um, so like if this person here, um, people could walk behind her and potentially see how she's voting. That's not typically how it should be set up in a polling place. This is for demonstration purposes. And that was one of the issues I had the last time I went to vote is our machine was turned out and it was right by the tabulator. So anybody walking by could see who you voted for. And I just mentioned it to them and they fixed it. And then they asked me if I saw anything else that was wrong. Um, the problems that we hear about the machine is that maybe election officials don't know how to use it. It might not be up and running or functioning properly. The ink is expensive and sometimes it runs out of ink. Um, I think we've only once heard of a place that didn't have a voting machine at all. And again, that's illegal. Um, oh, and curbside voting, I'm sorry, we just wanted you to see, like, this is a really good example of how curbside signage should be. It's very clear, easy to see with a number to call right there. So then some of the resources, we have the website, the Facebook page again. There is our voter hotline number, 844-DIS-VOTE or 844-347-8683. You can call that number anytime. You can call it on election day. And somebody will usually get back to you within 24 hours if they don't pick up right away. You can also email questions to us at disabilityvote.org. I also want to point out that we have a rides to the polls document. That's a big problem that we hear people talk about is how am I going to get there? Because a lot of people do prefer to vote in person. Um, so these are rides that we've collected over the years from different locations. It certainly cannot cover the whole state. There's just too many communities, but we are constantly adding to this and updating it. It says 2025, but we have updated it for 2026. Um, if you know of a ride and you or an option for a ride to the poll, that's not on there, please let us know. We would certainly appreciate that. You can call us at that number or email us, and we will add that right away. And then the Election Commission is the body that oversees elections in Wisconsin. They are also the person, if you want to file a formal complaint, they are the people that you would talk to. They have a hotline as well that you can call, especially on election day. You can find out all there is to know about elections on their website. They also have a ton of resources. The My Vote, you saw a screenshot of that where you can find your polling place, ballot, update your voter registration, request a ballot. It's a wonderful website. And photo ID is required in Wisconsin. Bring It to the Ballot is the go-to resource for what the photo ID requirements are. You can also get a free voter ID for voting purposes at the DMV. You can call that hotline to find out what you would need to get that ID before you go. And if you're running up against a lot of barriers, there's a helpline specific to obtaining voter ID. So those are all super important numbers. I also want to make you aware that there's been a lot of talk about the SAVE Act. Um, it's important to know that no changes have been made. Nothing is different for these upcoming elections in Wisconsin at this time. That has not passed. We do have some concerns about it because there are a few things in there that will make it harder for some people with disabilities to vote. For example, having to register in person. It would eliminate being able to register online or mail in a registration form. That's going to create difficulties for non-drivers. We already have the photo ID, so that's not as much of a concern here. There we go. Um, we have put out a couple of newsletters about the SAVE Act. And there's really a lot of information out there. If you Google that, feel free to please ask us questions because I think there's a lot of misinformation about it and people aren't really understanding the full impact. And so if that is a concern, we encourage you to contact Senator Baldwin and Senator Johnson and let them know what you think. So that is what we have for you today, and we do have time for questions if anybody has any. We are using the Q&A option. So let me just check. I think that's just comments. Oh, here's a question. Can a voter use their AAC device to give their name, address, or answer other questions when signing in with poll worker? Yes, you can definitely use that device. It's still saying it out loud. It's meeting all the requirements, so that's not a problem. Good question. Anything else that you'd like to know about?
It looks like there are two questions in the Q&A. One is, does the ID have to be a federal real ID?
So I don't believe it has to be a real ID at this time, not a federal real ID. That is something on the table for the SAVE Act, um, which is another concern of ours. And does the SAVE Act require people to show proof of citizenship to register to vote? Yes. Um, Ironically, though, you already have to prove that you're a citizen to vote. That's already law. So I think that's causing confusion that people think this is new. And and it's, tightening up who can vote. You've always had to prove you're a citizen to register to vote. But yes, that how they require you to show that proof is what is very burdensome to people. Like having a passport, like half of us don't have a passport. It can be expensive to get one. It can be about $185. That's a lot of money to some people. Um, Women who have changed their name, most of us don't update our birth certificate. So that's going to cause an issue for women who are married. Um, what is the proper documentation I can show to prove who I am with my name changed? That's kind of a still a question. Um, um, you would need a birth certificate. Um, a lot of people don't have their birth certificates anymore. You can request one. But again, it's going to take timing, planning, to make sure that's all ready to go. You have to register in person. If you update your registration, it would have to be done in person. Um, so yeah, a lot of things like that are going to make it hard for a lot of people, especially people with disabilities that we work with, which is why we've been tracking it so closely. Is it okay to share the fact sheets and information from your website in this presentation in our printed newsletter? Oh my gosh, we would love that. Yes, absolutely. We encourage that. The more people that spread the word, the better. And if you're not already signed up to get our e-newsletters, you can easily do that on our website. And then you've got it every time one comes out, you can forward it on or share it with people. Irma, a passport's a little cheaper to get. A passport card is a little cheaper to get. I'm not versed at all in the differences between a passport and a passport card, and if a card would meet um, um, the qualifications in the SAVE Act. Um, Good to know about and track, but we're not sure yet. So we're keeping an eye on that legislation. It's in the Senate right now. They're, from what we understand, they're about to start debates and figure out that. So another question for married women, if they've changed their name with Social Security and have their maiden name on a Social Security card as well as a married name, will this meet the same requirements? Or does the name have to match birth certificate in order to vote if it passes? That's one of the problems with the SAVE Act is it's not entirely clear. It's not at all clear how how that would be handled for married women. So I really can't answer that. And that's a big concern. All right. Anything else? All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up. Oh, here's a question. How can people recording? Can you please send it at the end of Zoom? Thank you for doing this. We will send it out. It won't be right away at the end. It takes a little bit for Zoom to um, get it to us, and then we have to upload it to YouTube. But we'll send it out with the slides. Good question. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. This is really important information, and yeah, absolutely share widely everything that you learned today. And thank you for being here. We'll have another one this summer, another webinar focused around guardianship and voting issues. So stay tuned for that.